Rolling right along in hour number 4 on a snowy Monday morning in Nashville. Welcome into RKW, brewed by 8th and Roast. With Kayla Anderson, I'm Will Boling. Robert Walsh, our producer. Ramon Foster with the morning off. As we are joined this morning by our good friend Randy Mueller, former NFL general manager, with just a little bit to talk about around the league and here in Nashville. Randy, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, guys. Good to be back with you.
Good to have you, Randy.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you taking the time. And let's start here locally, of course, with Mike Vrabel's firing and with the opening here for the Tennessee Titans. What was your initial reaction to the Vrabel firing and just now the opportunity the Titans have with a lot of cap space and with a top 10 pick to go in a different direction?
Well, we've all kind of, I think, had heard the rumors throughout the season. That's for sure. You knew things weren't they weren't having kumbaya meetings at night. I could tell you that. And so it got to the point where probably some actions had to follow, especially with the results of the end of the season. So I know Mike. I think Mike's a really good coach. I think if matched with the right front office, could be a Super Bowl type winning coach. So, but I also understand that is a marriage that can't be prearranged. That's for sure. So I think the Titans are in a really good spot. I think they've got to obviously make the right hire. The hard part for me is when you look at the landscape of possibilities, it's not always the most qualified guy that gets the job. It's the one that fits within the structure and the agendas of the people already in the building. So that can be looked at. There's no shortage of good coaches, both inexperienced or non-head coaches in the past, and some pretty accomplished head coaches as well. But you said it, they need to retool. They've got some tools to do that with some cap space and a couple draft picks. And the league is set up now to where you can get good in a hurry. I know Titans fans hope that Ran Carthon is the guy to make that happen.
Former NFL GM Randy Mueller, our guest this morning on 104.5 The Zone. And Randy, specifically, when you talk about Ran Carthon being asked now to lead a search of this level of importance after just 1 year in the building and on the job and finding that marriage that works, what has been your first impression of him coming over as the number 3 from San Francisco? What have you liked about what he's been able to do here so far in Nashville?
Well, I didn't know Rand that well. I've met him a few times on the road and actually in the 49ers building. Got a chance to see how he operates. I think it is a learning process for somebody to come from, like you say, the third chair to the first chair. It's a little bit of an on-the-job training period. And he had what I think in Mike Vrabel is someone to really lean on. Now, we all know Mike's personality and the way he is. So he maybe didn't get as much of an opportunity to lead in that second seed to the head coach, but I do think he's made progress. I think it comes down to being able to evaluate, and his success is going to be determined at the quarterback position. They've got some really big decisions to be made there, and we're going to see if Rand is up for the job or not, because that is the most focal point of everybody's criticism of where the Titans are. I thought it was interesting that Amy, the owner, in her press release said that it looks like we've found our quarterback. I don't know if that's the case or not. And so I paused a little bit when I read that. I think there's still some evaluating to do, still some learning to do there with regard to Will Levis. And I'm really not ready to drink that same Kool-Aid to say we have found him yet. So they've got a job to do still, in my opinion.
Randy Mueller, former GM in the NFL, also on the Football GM podcast on The Athletic. You can check that out. Great podcast. Randy, and you talked about that. Maybe you aren't sold on Will Levis yet, and there are some people that are not sold on him, even some Titans fans here. How important is it then for them to maybe keep some consistency with Will Levis to continue to develop him, maybe keep a Charles London on staff or go get someone who's familiar with him if they want to make sure this is their guy? Because if it's not their guy, Randy, they're going backwards again.
Yeah, and it's not the first time because, as you guys know, they picked one the year before as well. Not that that's on this regime's resume, but yeah, it's a hard job to fill, no doubt. And you bring up a great point, Kayla. It is a fine line between change and allowing somebody like Will Levis to get better at their task, at their job. And when you keep changing offenses, it does set quarterbacks back. They then have to go back in the learning mode and memorize and figure out a new system, and they don't really get to advance their own trade. That's the hard part. And I think there's going to be some change in the system, no doubt about it. But that does initially set quarterbacks back, and it's why, hey, even the great ones, Peyton Manning, when he went from Indy to Denver, brought his own offense. Tom Brady, when he went from New England to Tampa, brought his own offense. These guys didn't want to learn something new, but these young guys don't really have the cachet to do that, so they've got to take the hand they're dealt. And we saw what happened with Justin Fields in Chicago, where he's had 2 or 3 different offenses, and you see traits, but you never see really the advancement to being an NFL quarterback. So that's a hard decision that the organization will have to make. I think the truth is probably in between somewhere, Kayla, in that they have to keep some of the same, but yet add to the theory and the scheme that he can learn and advance from by accentuating the positives within his skill set.
You've kind of heard of some of the candidates that the Titans have interviewed. When you look at the amount of candidates that are out there, first and foremost, you mentioned some of them have experience, some of them not as much. Who do you feel at this point would be the best fit for the Titans?
Sometimes it's as important to get a leader of men as it is to get a scheme or a play caller per se. I tend to lean a little bit on the offensive side because you have so much at stake with the quarterbacks there that you need to find someone that can not only install a system but manage the game. And I always think managing the game is easier for an offensive coach or somebody who's calling the plays on one side of the ball or another. So I think that has to be part of the equation. I also think the staff that coach brings with him is really important. And I'll be honest with you, I really like Brian Callahan from Cincinnati, and I'm not so sure that he couldn't talk his dad into coming with him, the offensive line coach for what I think is one of the better offensive lines in the league in the Cleveland Browns. So those are the kind of packages you have to look at. Who can you get with that candidate? And I'm sure they'll sort through all that stuff. It's a puzzle that takes a lot of mending and piecing things together to get the group that gives you the best chance going forward to not only build, but to teach. You need teachers in this day and age because the only thing that's for sure is there will be change every year. And I think the coaching part is great, but the teaching part sometimes goes unnoticed in what you're getting from these guys when you build your staff.
Former NFL General Manager Randy Mueller, our guest. And Randy, when you talk about offensive coordinators who aren't play callers, and specifically Brian Callahan, the lieutenant under Zach Taylor, even a Frank Smith, who has not been asked to interview with the Titans yet, but another candidate around the league in Miami with Mike McDaniel. From the general manager perspective, what is the number one thing you need to learn about someone like that who isn't calling plays in order to feel like they are ready to take that step to become a head coach?
I think and it's hard, and it's a great point, but don't forget this, and I'll just throw this out before I answer, is Andy Reid didn't call plays before he got the job in Philadelphia either. So it can be done. The hardest part is you've got to find a way to extract from people around that person or that candidate how they are when the lights are brightest. Because you're right, it is one thing to devise a scheme or a game plan Monday through Saturday, and then someone else calls the game on Sunday. You have to try to find a way through sources, through people close to the situation, of how they most think that they will react or that candidate will react on Sundays when, let's face it, when things go bad. That's the hardest thing about these jobs, whether you're a GM, a head coach, or a play caller, is how will that personality react when things go bad, because they're going to go bad. So it's part of the criteria for hiring somebody that I think is hardest to connect the dots with when you find a coach who you really like, who is a really good leader, but he's never really called plays or managed that game within a game on Sundays.
Well, Randy, you spent time with Nick Saban in Miami, and you have certainly knowledge of what it's like being with a head coach who has the say on the roster and is a loud voice in that room, dictating a lot of those decisions. Did you feel like Mike Vrabel had earned the right to have final say here? That there's a lot of people that want to debate this now that we kind of have more information about what the setup was like with Ran Carthon. Do you feel like wherever he goes next, he, with the resume he has in this league, has earned that privilege?
Well, I would say this, and I'm not dodging the question, but more importantly to me is and I've worked with Mike Holmgren the same way in
Sure.
Seattle, Nick Saban. It's not really who's in charge or has final say. It's how they can work it together, because I've found this over the years. If you don't agree, or if you can't agree on a certain road to take, you're better off picking another one. Because if you pick a road that you're not both on the same page on, it's going to come back to haunt you one way or another, and people end up choosing up sides. So I think if I could advise Mike on anything, not that he's going to ask me, but I've worked under coaches, I've worked equal with coaches, and I've worked as the coach's boss. The relationship and the decisions stay the same, in that we got to agree or we're going to pick a different lane. That's all.
Former NFL GM Randy Mueller with us now. So, Randy, we were just talking about this on the show. We're not sure what Mike McCarthy's future will hold after that awful performance by the Cowboys last night at home, where they were perfect for pretty much the last 2 years. So, could you see a situation where a Bill Belichick goes and pairs up with an owner like Jerry Jones that doesn't give a ton of control because he's most of the control there? Could you still see a scenario of that happening where Jerry just wants to win a Super Bowl before he's gone?
Well, I really don't, and I know all the media reports have been that is the speculation. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for me. I know that Bill Belichick's mentor is Bill Parcells, and he kind of left there for that reason. Just the setup, the structure really goes against what those guys believe in their DNA, is that during the season, it is the coach's job to be the face of the franchise. I don't know how Bill Belichick would like it when across the locker room, Jerry Jones is having post-game press conferences at the same time. I just don't see that working out. So I guess you never know. I think you say Jerry wants to win, and I think he does, but I have yet to see where Jerry's willing to change anything or any way he does business in order to win. So that tells me he's okay with losing, but doing it his way.
Randy, there are a lot of job openings right now, and I'm just curious as to where do you feel like Nashville stacks up with the rest in terms of, for some of these coaches going there instead of some of these other places?
Well, it should be a good job. Obviously, you guys know about the environment there. The fans are outstanding. They have no issue with support. I think the business community and the revenue stream that allows these teams to spend cash on players and coaches is not an issue there. So I think that's good. But you're right. It is a competitive field right now, and there are some pretty good jobs that are open as far as coaches go. I do think that Tennessee's one advantage is that they don't have to hire a GM. There are 4 or 5 teams now looking to hire GMs before they hire a coach. So that could set the timeline back a little bit for those places. It's interesting that the Commanders acted over the weekend to hire Adam Peters from the 49ers. Now they can go to bat hiring their coach. So they're going to, I think, be at the front of the line for some of these coaches. I don't think it should be any negative to work with or under Ran, because I think his reputation is good. It sounds like people will come visit there and go through the process with them. But I think it's important for him to act definitively. And the league has pumped the brakes and had the process has slowed down now with all the directives and boxes you have to check. But at the same time, they've got to do their due diligence and kind of know in the back of their mind kind of where they want these hiring processes to lead them. So I think it's a good job. Do I think it's the best job? Maybe not. But hey, it's the one job that any of these jobs, they're not going to say no to. So you just got to sell yourself and sell your franchise, sell your ownership. And I think they'll do a good job of that with Tennessee.
Randy, I loved reading on The Athletic your piece last week about Nick Saban and remembering some of the fun stories and just going from being on the 10th tee at a Spokane golf course to then becoming
Shout out Spokane.
a member of the Miami Dolphins organization with Nick Saban. I imagine you've had the chance to reflect and tell a lot of Nick Saban stories over the last week as he hangs it up as the head coach of the Crimson Tide. What is the number one thing as you think about your couple years with him and just your relationship with him? What did he do that was so different that you feel like was so successful for his career and his time as a college coach and in his short stint as an NFL coach?
Well, for me, the biggest thing he did, and I don't know that I thought it was a positive at the time, but every day you had to show up with your ankles taped. Every day. We had no easy Saturday practice. We had no easy Friday practice. So every day you had to be ready to roll and defend your opinions and defend your decisions and defend what you say. Now, that is not for everybody. That will wear some people out. But for me, I thought it was great. I know this. He treated me really good, and he treats anybody good who does their job and works at it and is prepared and professional. And I thought that was really good. I enjoyed my time with Nick. And again, we come from total opposite personalities, walks of life, everything, but we worked very well together. And I think that, as much as anything, advanced my professional career, my time with him, because he forces you to have an open mind to listen and do things differently. And it was fun to actually learn different ways. And this was after 25 years in the league for myself. So I enjoyed it. And I'll be forever indebted to Nick Saban for sure.
And I'll tell you one thing, Randy, that coaching search when I was in Montgomery, Alabama, at my first ever full-time sports job, that was the longest grueling search ever down there in Tuscaloosa. And when he came to town, I'll tell you one thing, that first season, I was a little scared of Nick Saban, but I'm glad because he taught me how to be a tough reporter. So
I'll tell you the funny thing was I texted him the other day after all the dust had settled to congratulate him and just wish him well. And he texted me back. And I was shocked because this is a man that didn't return emails and he didn't text anybody for the last 20 years. So this is the technological advances that either his wife has made on him or somebody's made on him. But I was very impressed by the fact that he could actually return texts for years. Even when we worked together, I would text him and I knew he read it, but he'd never reply.
That's great.
So he's making progress. He's replying now to emails and texts.
That's great.
It sounds like Terry Saban then is responding to emails and texts. That's impressive. Randy Mueller, former NFL GM, has been our guest. Well, we're going to link that story on The Athletic. Some great Nick Saban stories here on our Twitter, at Ramon Kayla Will, in just a minute, if you want to go check that out. Really, really good stuff. And Randy, great insight as always. Thank you so much for the time.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Randy.
Absolutely. There's Randy Mueller.
It was good stuff.
Really good perspective on a difficult scenario for the Titans, and just, I think, the sweepstakes of courting different coaches who have a lot of options. I think that's interesting. Randy sees this as one of the better openings because Ran Carthon has been here for a year.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I think there are some other jobs like the Panthers that, they have to hire that GM first, and that's an extra step. And it feels like they have what we think we'll get from them soon is that vision. And it's a great place. Like, it's a big little city where you have eyes on you, but it's not all the time. And I feel like for a head coach who comes here, who has what seems to be their quarterback, will have a little bit of time to grow. It's not going to be perfect in the first year for whoever comes here. Maybe it is. Maybe they overachieve. But for the most part, it's not going to have the expectations of a big market year one in terms of at least the national media shining down on you. So I think that's also a positive for some of these head coaches to be able to really grow this first year.
We'll wrap up the show coming up next. And again, at Ramon Kayla Will on Twitter is where you can find that story that Randy Mueller wrote. Tells a couple of really cool stories about Nick Saban and about film study on planes, always having your tablet on you, and going to the Chargers and realizing, I think he said at the very end of it, said, losing was so easy to do at LA. I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but said Nick would fire us all if we acted the way that we did with the Chargers after they spent time together in Miami. Really good stuff you can check out on our Twitter, at Ramon Kayla Will. Appreciate Randy stopping by here for a couple minutes this morning. But coming